The moment the Viking chieftain died, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. The village fell into an eerie, heavy silence, as if every tree, every river, and every soul sensed that something monumental had occurred. This was no ordinary man. He was a warrior, a leader, and a force of power whose life had shaped the fate of everyone around him. His death wasn't merely a personal loss. It was a turning point for the entire settlement. In the eyes of the Vikings, honor did not end with life. It demanded one final, terrifying performance, a ritual so extreme that it blurred the line between devotion and cruelty. Ibn Fadlan, an Arab traveler journeying along the Volga River, witnessed this chilling event firsthand. He wrote of ceremonies so elaborate, so shocking, that even today, his accounts leave readers unsettled. The chieftain's funeral was far from quiet or private. For 10 long days, the village erupted into feverish preparation. Warriors and villagers gathered wood, polished weapons until they gleamed, arranged treasures of gold, silver, and intricate jewelry, and readied the chieftain's finest animals, horses, dogs, and even falcons, for the journey ahead. Every detail mattered, because the Vikings believed the chieftain would need these items to command respect and maintain power in the afterlife. Yet, the most horrifying aspect of the ritual lay in the human participants, the female thralls. These enslaved women, chosen for their youth and health, had lived under the chieftain's roof, performing household duties and serving him in life. Now, their fate was sealed. They were bathed, dressed in their finest garments, and adorned with jewelry, their hair carefully arranged as part of a ritual meant to honor the dead. Yet this was no act of kindness. Their preparation was symbolic, a grim reminder that in the Viking worldview, loyalty extended even beyond death. Their service, devotion, and ultimately their lives were bound to the chieftain's journey into the next world. Ibn Fadlan describes the scene with a mixture of awe and horror. Some thralls were given alcohol or sedatives to dull their terror, while others faced their fate fully aware, their eyes wide with fear. The village gathered in solemn anticipation, knowing that every motion, every ritual gesture, reinforced the sacred and brutal order that governed their lives. The thralls were led to the ship with a mixture of fear, resignation, and ritualized dignity, each step echoing the weight of what was to come. Finally, the climactic moment arrived. The chieftain's body was placed upon the ship, surrounded by treasures, weapons, and the lifeless or sedated thralls. Flames were set to the vessel, and smoke spiraled into the sky as if signaling the gods themselves. The river reflected the fiery spectacle, creating an otherworldly scene that seemed suspended between life and death. Villagers watched in silent awe. Their grief was profound, yet they felt the satisfaction that honor had been preserved, that their leader would continue to command respect even in the afterlife. Ibn Fadlan's account of this event remains one of the most vivid records of Viking funerary practices. It reveals a world where death was not the end, but a continuation of social order, power, and loyalty. The story of the chieftain and his thralls is not simply one of brutality. It is a glimpse into a culture that revered courage, devotion, and the extreme lengths humans would go to preserve honor. Flames, smoke, treasure, and human sacrifice combined to create a final act that was as terrifying as it was awe-inspiring. Even today, centuries later, the tale forces us to confront a world where death demanded spectacle and where power and devotion were inseparable, even in the face of mortality. Ibn Fadlan's account of the Vikings offers one of the most chilling glimpses into the customs of the Rus people, particularly the fate of the chieftain's female thralls after his death. These women were not ordinary servants. They were chosen for their youth, health, and beauty, often plucked from the chieftain's household or captured from conquered lands. Their lives, seemingly ordinary until that moment, were suddenly consumed by a ritual that was both sacred and horrifying. From the instant the chieftain drew his last breath, their destiny was sealed, and there was no turning back. The preparation for the ritual was meticulously calculated. The thralls were washed from head to toe, their bodies cleansed in water and scented oils, almost as if they were being readied for a grand celebration rather than a terrifying final act. Fine garments, sometimes richly embroidered or decorated with beads and jewelry, were laid upon them. Every adornment, the glint of metal, the shimmer of fabric, was meant to honor the chieftain in the afterlife. Yet, beneath the beauty, a grim reality hung in the air. This was a preparation for death. The clothing and ornaments were not tokens of comfort, but instruments in a ritual designed to ensure the chieftain would not journey alone to the world beyond. Ibn Fadlan paints a haunting contrast between appearance and reality. The women were treated with a mixture of reverence and fear. The villagers, understanding the sacredness of the act, treated the thralls with formal respect. They were given drinks, sometimes alcohol, and were gently informed of their duty to accompany their master in death, to serve him in the afterlife as they had in life. Some of the women, perhaps hardened by years of servitude or a sense of loyalty, accepted their fate with quiet resignation. Others, however, could not suppress the human terror coursing through them. Their wails filled the air, echoing against the wooden homes and the river that ran through the village. Ibn Fadlan's words capture the juxtaposition of horror and devotion, women offering their lives, not in rebellion, but in obedience to a code older than memory. The ritual itself was elaborate and grim. The thralls were led to the chieftain's ship, which had been prepared to become his final resting place. Weapons, offerings, and the chieftain's finest belongings were already aboard. The ship was more than a vessel, it was a bridge between worlds. Here, the sacred and the macabre merged. The thralls' role was clear. They would ensure that the chieftain was accompanied, attended, and honored even in death. Some historians suggest that this act reflected the Viking belief in a continuum between life and the afterlife. The chieftain's power, influence, and comforts were to extend beyond the grave, and the thralls were central to this passage. Ibn Fadlan's eyes, as he described the scene, were both horrified and fascinated. He writes not only of the physical preparations, but of the emotions, the tension, the fragile humanity of the women facing an unimaginable fate. There was an eerie calm in the village as the ritual approached its climax. The thralls' beauty, their adornments, and their obedience were both a tribute and a haunting reminder of the customs that bound this society. The villagers watched with solemn respect, performing their roles as witnesses to the sacred act. And when the moment arrived, the line between devotion and cruelty, reverence and terror, life and death, blurred completely. In the end, these women, chosen for their youth and vitality, became an integral part of the chieftain's journey. Ibn Fadlan's account preserves the tension of the ritual, the meticulous care, the finality of the thralls' fates, and the stark reality of a society where death demanded not only mourning but the continuation of earthly hierarchies into the afterlife. His observations leave us both appalled and captivated, offering a rare, unflinching look at a world in which loyalty, fear, and ritual intertwined in ways unimaginable to modern eyes. The climax of the Viking funeral ritual was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, taking place at the chieftain's ship, which had been transformed into a vessel of passage to the afterlife. This was no ordinary ship. It was a floating sanctuary of death, meticulously prepared to honor the fallen leader. The chieftain's body, laid upon the deck, was surrounded by treasures that reflected both his status and the wealth he had amassed in life. Weapons gleamed in the dim light, shields were arranged with ceremonial precision, and textiles, intricately woven and richly colored, draped across the ship, a testament to the craftsmanship of the Viking people. Personal belongings, from combs to jewelry, were placed at his side, each item meant to serve him in the world beyond. Yet, at the heart of this chilling scene were the female thralls, whose presence transformed the funeral into an event both ritualistic and horrifying. These women, often young, chosen from the chieftain's household or captured in raids, had a fate that was inseparable from the man they served. Some had been sedated, their consciousness dulled by drugs or alcohol, a cruel mercy to ease the terror of what awaited them. Others were fully awake, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resignation as they were bound and positioned beside their master. The precision of the ritual was remarkable. Every movement, every placement of a thrall or a treasure was executed with unwavering adherence to tradition. Ibn Fadlan, the Arab traveler who witnessed this firsthand along the Volga River, could not conceal his horror and fascination as he recorded the events. He noted the efficiency with which the women were laid down, some unconscious, some struggling faintly, all of them destined to accompany the chieftain into death. As preparations concluded, the ship itself became a floating tomb. The thralls were arranged so that their final moments would mirror the chieftain's journey, a passage from life into the feared and revered unknown. Then came the moment the Vikings had been anticipating. The pyre was set alight. Flames licked the wooden hull, casting a fiery glow over the surrounding settlement, while thick smoke spiraled into the sky, visible for miles. The air was filled with the sounds of the living, the shouting, singing, and ceremonial cries of the Viking community. This was no somber mourning. It was a celebration of power, courage, and the belief that the chieftain's spirit would continue to wield authority in the afterlife. Ibn Fadlan's account captures the intensity of this climactic moment. He describes a scene in which devotion and dread coexisted in every shout and every flicker of firelight. The thralls, bound and helpless, became part of the spectacle, their presence both a mark of honor in Viking eyes and an act of unspeakable brutality. As the flames consumed the ship, the ritual achieved its intended purpose. The chieftain was sent forth, surrounded by treasures and attendants, his power extended into eternity. The Vikings believed that by sacrificing these women alongside him, they ensured that he would not lack companionship or influence in the afterlife. For Ibn Fadlan, the scene was unforgettable. Smoke and fire merged with the raw cries of the living, forming a tableau that was terrifying yet strangely majestic. The ship burned, carrying the chieftain and his thralls into legend, leaving behind the stunned witnesses, both Viking and foreigner alike, to contemplate the mixture of devotion, fear, and finality that defined the Norse approach to life, death, and what lay beyond. The ritual, harsh and brutal as it was, encapsulated the Viking worldview, that honor, loyalty, and power did not end with death. They were preserved, celebrated, and, in the most literal sense, carried forward into eternity. Ibn Fadlan's writings are extraordinary because they offer one of the very few accounts of Viking life from an outsider's perspective. Unlike most sources about the Vikings, which come from sagas written generations later and often romanticized, Ibn Fadlan recorded what he saw in real time, without embellishment. He was an Arab diplomat, traveling along the Volga River in the early 10th century, tasked with observing foreign peoples and reporting back to the Abbasid Caliphate. His journey brought him into direct contact with the Rus, the Viking traders and warriors who traveled deep into Eastern Europe. What makes his notes so remarkable is their raw honesty. They are detailed, sometimes shocking, and disturbingly candid about customs that, to his own world, seemed barbaric. One of the most haunting aspects of Ibn Fadlan's account is his description of the funerary rituals of a Viking chieftain. When a leader died, the Vikings didn't merely mourn. They celebrated, prepared, and performed rituals to honor him and ensure his passage into the afterlife. Central to this ritual were the chieftain's female thralls. Ibn Fadlan writes with a mixture of fascination and horror about these women. Their fear was palpable, their eyes wide with terror, as they were bathed, dressed in the finest clothes, adorned with jewelry, and made ready for their grim role. To the outsiders, this was horrifying. Young women, sometimes chosen from among captured peoples, were expected to die alongside their master. But in the Viking worldview, this was not murder. It was sacred duty. Their sacrifice ensured that the chieftain would not be alone in Valhalla and symbolized loyalty that transcended death itself. Ibn Fadlan doesn't shy away from the contrast between his own cultural understanding and that of the Vikings. He describes the excitement of the warriors, the chanting, the preparation of the pyre, and the careful placement of weapons, treasures, and personal items meant to accompany the chieftain into the next world. Every detail is meticulously noted, from the construction of the ship that would carry the body to the intricate positioning of the women on the pyre. To him, these acts were brutal and incomprehensible. To the Vikings, they were a sacred tradition, an ultimate demonstration of honor and devotion. This perspective highlights how cultural context shapes the interpretation of life and death. What seems horrifying in one society can be a profound act of respect and duty in another. Beyond the immediate shock of the ritual, Ibn Fadlan's account reveals much about Viking society itself. He shows us a culture structured around leadership, loyalty, and hierarchy. The chieftain's death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a communal event that reinforced social order and spiritual beliefs. The participation of the women, as grim as it seems to outsiders, played a vital role in maintaining spiritual balance, reflecting the Vikings' belief that the afterlife was connected to earthly actions and loyalty. These women, while victims of a cruel fate, were integral to the cosmology that governed life and death in Viking culture. They embodied the continuation of social and spiritual obligations, ensuring that the chieftain's journey to Valhalla was complete and that the community's honor was preserved. Ibn Fadlan's writings also give us insight into the sensory experience of these rituals, the sounds, sights, and emotions. He notes the clang of weapons, the cheers of warriors, the smell of burning wood, and the tension in the faces of the women. By recording these elements with such vivid detail, he allows us to feel the intensity of the moment, to understand why it left such a strong impression on him, and why it was so central to the Viking worldview. His account bridges the gap between our modern understanding and a culture that existed more than 1,000 years ago, giving us a rare, unfiltered window into the beliefs, values, and practices of the Vikings. In essence, Ibn Fadlan's observations are invaluable. They are more than historical notes. They are a lens through which we can understand a world both alien and fascinating. Through his eyes, we see the stark contrasts between cultures, the complexity of Viking society, and the ways honor, death, and loyalty intertwined in a civilization that, to many outsiders, seemed both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The story of the chieftain's female thralls is not just history. It is a haunting reminder of the extremes of human belief and the vast cultural gaps that existed between civilizations. Ibn Fadlan, an Arab traveler who witnessed these rituals firsthand along the Volga River, recorded events that shock modern readers. His account blends devotion, brutality, and ritual in a way that feels almost cinematic, almost unreal, yet it was the stark reality of the Viking world. For the Vikings, death was never the end. The passing of a chieftain was an event that demanded spectacle, precision, and unquestioned loyalty. Every part of the ceremony had meaning. The chieftain's wealth, status, and personal achievements dictated a farewell so grand that it could ensure his honor in the afterlife. And at the center of this ritual were the female thralls, young, healthy women chosen from the household or even from conquered lands, whose fate was sealed the moment the chieftain died. These women were bathed, dressed in luxurious garments, and adorned with jewelry that sparkled in the torchlight. It was a cruel irony. The appearance of honor and beauty cloaked an inevitable, terrifying death. Some thralls were given alcohol to dull their fear, while others faced their fate fully aware of the horrors awaiting them. Ibn Fadlan describes the fear in their eyes, the trembling hands, the quiet pleas for mercy, and, in rare instances, the defiant looks that met their doom. As the ceremony progressed, the chieftain's body was placed on a specially constructed ship, surrounded by treasures, swords, weapons, fine textiles, and other personal items meant to accompany him into the afterlife. Then, the thralls were brought forward one by one, to be sacrificed in a ritual that fused devotion with terror. The ship was set ablaze, consuming wood, riches, the chieftain, and the terrified women in a single, blazing inferno. The warriors cheered, celebrating what they believed was the ultimate act of loyalty and honor. For the Vikings, the ritual ensured that the chieftain's journey continued with companionship, wealth, and protection. For modern readers, it is a stark and unsettling glimpse into a culture where devotion and cruelty coexisted. Ibn Fadlan's words preserve every horrifying detail: the cries, the flames, the intoxicating mix of fear and reverence, allowing us to imagine a world so different from our own. Even today, picturing the scene, the ship aflame, the terrified thralls, the cheering warriors, leaves a lasting impression. It is a story of absolute power, unflinching belief, and the razor-thin line between honor and cruelty. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about loyalty, tradition, and the extremes of human behavior. If tales like this fascinate you, and you want to explore more shocking, unbelievable stories from history that feel straight out of a movie, make sure you hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications. Don't miss a single moment of history's most gripping, terrifying, and jaw-dropping stories. Join us and step into worlds you never thought existed, where every ritual, every battle, and every secret of the past comes alive.